Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fat Muscle Project podcast. Again, that's PHAT fat. And if you're from the 90s, you know that stands for pretty hot and tempting, not FAT. That's the kind of fat we want to be. I'm John Gorman, one of your hosts today, pretty cheesy today. We've got Lisa Franz in the house. Lisa, are you in Germany right now?
I am indeed, actually. Yes, I arrived here about a week ago.
And what time is it there? Here it is 1 o'clock Central Time. What
For
is
me,
it?
it's 8 p.m., so 7 hours later. Yes.
Well, in these future podcasts, we're going to be okay because you're gonna be adapted. So
Exactly. No, I after a week, I actually didn't have a jet lag at all, and I mean 8 p.m. is still okay at this stage. We have lots of daylight, so at least it's not like full nighttime.
Yeah, you're our world traveler. We love living vicariously through you to see all your travels and all the cool food that you eat everywhere. Like, especially if someone's dieting and they want to look at, I wouldn't call it food porn. I'd call it healthy food.
Yeah,
Just,
I would say
yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're always living the life and living it healthy. So, anything new for you besides traveling halfway across the world?
No, really just trying to keep up with my routines of like sleep routine, working out routine, food routines, and so on as best as I can while still catching up with my family and, going to family obligations. But for me, like what keeps me anchored no matter where I am really is like having those set times and things. I think if it fell away for too long, then I wouldn't actually enjoy travel as much as I do.
Yeah, I'm with you with the on the travel end. We're doing so much. We're helping build so many coaches and gyms, supplement lines. Like that's been really, really fun, and I've enjoyed that. And then on the medical side, actually, in the back of my arm, I've got a continuous glucose monitor for the
Oh,
first time ever. Trying that out, so I'm like 3 days in. I'll
cool.
post a little bit more about that. I wanted to give these like a few years to get more accurate. I know when we kind of tested them out, like in 2020 the readings were all over the place. They half the time they wouldn't work. So I'm going to test this one out. We carry this at Premier U and get some results here. So I've tried it, taking metformin to kind of watch how it reacts and stuff like that because I have a script for metformin and not taking it. So anyway, more on that coming up soon. We'll probably talk about that on a podcast episode when we have Brandon back on. So to talk about peptides. Real quick before we get to our very special guest down in Florida, where it's probably raining on her right now, because it rains there daily.
It's
It's
cloudy. It's not raining yet, but it's cloudy, but the sun is still visible. So, typical
yeah,
Florida.
yeah. It'll rain in 2 minutes. Before we get to her, what do we have coming up, Lisa? I've loved this because we've had so many great guests. We just had Leslie on, who's getting ready for the CrossFit Games, her first time ever qualifying for that. It's a big deal. Huge amount of responses to people saying they want to hear more
Oh,
from
cool.
Leslie. We had Team Masters on, and we've got so many things lined up. What do we have coming up next?
We also have Nick Langer come on. We have Brandon, as you mentioned. We do have Bill Campbell as well. So lots of amazing guests in the pipeline.
Yeah. Well, that gets us to today. So, for those of you that don't know who Lauren is, most of the people listening are familiar with Lauren. This will go out to our email list with Fat Muscle as well. And I just want to do a real quick, just kind of shoot from the hip introduction for Lauren because I know Lauren, I feel so well at this point. I first met her back in 2017, where she was one of the speakers at our Physique Summit conference. I mean, that is 8 years ago, Lauren. Can you
Wow.
believe it's went that fast?
It's honestly crazy because I saw the picture recently of us all on stage and I was like, wow, like that feels like yesterday, but also three lifetimes ago.
It really does. And that to me, that's what I want to talk to about most in your introduction. So Lauren's someone that, she's an IFBB pro. She's been through everything you can imagine as an athlete and an elite coach with clients that have just won left and right. I mean, one of the best coaches in the entire industry. Um, very educated. You studied at USF under Dr. Bill Campbell, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and your degree there, what is your actual degree that you got from USF?
My actual degree from USF was Master's in Exercise Science or Master's
Okay.
of Science in Exercise Science. But everybody sometimes doesn't think that because my research was all on, fat loss and weight regain and eating behaviors. So I was able to add in that spin, even though it was an exercise science program.
Yeah, which to me is very cool because in one of my presentations I just gave, I actually had a picture of you and other people up there as people that can bridge the gap as coaches and athletes. You know, some people, I would say you're more heavily leaned towards the research side of things for physique enhancement, but you also understand the bro science side, right? Where we just make guesses on what we think might work, which leads to great research, which people like you and Bill Campbell and other people have done. So you're really the type of person in the physique enhancement world that kind of has had your hands in everything, and then you add time to it. Even though you're young, you're not young in the sport, correct? Like you've been around. Like this is probably your what, 10 years in?
I've coached for 12 years, so
Wow.
Oh man, it's gone
Amazing.
by so fast. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, but that's cool, but it's not as cool as where we're going to go today. And you are in the middle of continuing your education. I'll let you name the exact degree, but you're in the mental health field,
Mhm.
soon to be a clinician. That to me encompasses everything that you've experienced yourself as a coach with the mental health side of things. And for anyone listening, if you're like, oh man, I don't want to hear this, let me tell you, you're probably the one that needs to hear it the most, the stuff that we're going to talk about today. So, Lauren, if you would talk a little bit more about where you're at currently and
Mhm.
where you kind of see this going on, you know, in the next 3 to 5 years and where you see yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm actually back at USF, full circle moment. And I'm in the clinical mental health counseling program, which in short means that I will be a licensed therapist in a couple years. Every state differs in terms of what it's called. Sometimes you'll see I will be an LMHC. Sometimes you'll see like LPC. Other time there's all these different acronyms based on what state you're in, which is very confusing to everybody. I don't know why they don't make that more consistent, but anyways, so I am going to be a counselor and I'm currently finishing up my first year. I have 2 more weeks left of the semester, and then I will be starting my second year. And right now I'm actually in the middle of or finishing out a my first practicum. So in these programs, whether you are in mental health or whether you're in social work or you're in marriage and family therapy, those are all slightly different degrees in terms of like the coursework. And the clinical hours are also slightly different, but everybody has to do a certain amount of clinical hours. In my program, I have to do 900 hours over 3 different semesters, and I'm choosing somewhere to work based on my interests. And so some people are in private practice, some people are working with veterans, other people like me are in the substance use and eating disorder dual diagnosis type program. So there's some people work with kids. So this is where you get to kind of decide and see where do you want to work, what population, where are your skills best, and also, of course, where you start does not mean what you're going to do forever. But I am currently at a facility that works. It is, drug and alcohol rehabilitation center, as well as dual diagnosis and eating disorders. So that is, what I'm currently finishing, and it has been very, very eye-opening experience. So I'm very grateful and blessed for this. In the next 3 to 5 years. So basically, I tell everybody, I'm like, this program, let's just call it 5 years because it's about 2.5 years full time. But then after I graduate, even with these hours, then I'm still what's called a registered intern, which makes no sense. Again, another label they should probably change. I think they actually are going to change that one because it's like, wait, you just did an internship, but now you're a registered intern? Like, it's just very confusing. So, anyways, once I'm done with school, I still have to do another um, several thousand hours that are supervised before I can sit for my licensing exam. And the minimum time is 2 years. The max is 5. So I always just say I'll be licensed in 5 years total is kind of the whole idea. So what I'm currently thinking, my whole goal of this, like you mentioned, John, is really kind of bringing everything together because I've had my hands in all different aspects of the industry. And really, what I was finding is that so many clients, especially the types of clients that I work with, really struggle emotionally, really have challenges with food and how that is integrated into their life. And it's generally not just about the food or the tracking or whatever this might be. And I was finding that I could help clients start to uncover things, but I wanted to get them further. And I really just saw myself as someone who had really this calling to do this. And I really tried to ignore it for a couple of years because I was like, I don't want to go back to school. Like, oh my gosh. And I do love school, but I was like, this is a whole different feel. Like, this is so different. Like, this is like a big thing. And if this is just my ego talking, like, I don't want to invest the time in this. But it really became clear that like this is what I wanted to do. And really like bringing the physical and mental health worlds together because they're starting to communicate more, but there's still like such a wide gap. So the long game is to have a fully integrated practice that is going to be able to service clients in a way that is taking care of their physical and mental and emotional health. And I would love that to be partially in person as well as, of course, virtually online. And I could really see a space where I could help also therapists, help educate therapists too on what I've done for the past 12 years and how can we bring this into practice in a way that's within scope. Just like I'll talk about mindset and psychology with, people in the fitness space within scope, same thing. So there's two things about me that I know I love learning and I love teaching. Like those are two of my favorite things. And so if I can do that with clients and also other practitioners in both spaces, like that's my ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Um, what I'm going to do in the next couple of years, I'm probably still going to like, definitely going to work somewhere and probably still continue to have coaching. I still have coaching and then also, maybe take on a few private practice clients, but mostly, really just getting my skills developed and sharpened like in the field before eventually transitioning to something like that. So that's further down the line, but that is the big goal.
Do you have openings for clients right now for anyone listening that's
Mhm.
looking for a coach? Because I'm telling you all
Absolutely.
right now, I highly recommend Lauren. I've worked
Yes.
with the same people, have sent people her way.
Yes.
Everything, all of her information's in the show notes. So you can click on that now. So you are taking clients. That's great. And then
Yes.
finally, before Lisa, I know I'm hogging the mic over here. I'm going to turn it over to you. Kudos to you for continuing to evolve because in an industry where a lot of people stay the same, the
Mhm.
industry always evolves, always. And it's the type of people that evolve with it that continue to grow, make more money if that's important or whatever. But, ultimately we'll have something that, you can look back on decades and decades later and be glad that you took this step. So I'm excited to watch you. I know I'm going to support you. I'll be sending people to you left and right once you're ready.
Thank
So
you.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Lisa, if you want to go ahead and take the reins, I'll sit
Yeah,
over here and be
absolutely. No,
quiet
there's
for a
so
bit.
much to
So.
dog onto. So I guess what I'm curious about right away, because you mentioned that many of your previous clients, or as you were kind of going through the physique enhancement, physique coaching space, many people had sort of disordered eating patterns. And maybe you can distinguish for us, like what's disordered eating, what's an eating disorder, like what's the difference there, and just in general, why body dysmorphia pops up quite a bit in that space.
Absolutely. And so typically when something is classified as a disorder, that's going to be something that you can open up the DSM, which is just kind of like the manual that mental health professionals use. And if there is a disorder in there, which body dysmorphia, muscle dysmorphia, and there's several eating disorders specified in there. The reason that they're in there is because it's not just that someone has these patterns, but it's that they've had them for quite a while. And there's always specifiers like at least 6 months, at least 2 years, whatever it might be. And it's the severity. So frequency, severity, and duration. So is someone experiencing maybe some eating trouble, but they just lost someone really close to them, or they just got laid off from the job, or there's like some big stressor in their life, right? Like those are things that we would expect, like, okay, we're going to maybe see this for a couple months and then it's going to, kind of work itself out. Versus when someone is having chronic issues that are going on for years and years and they're continuously getting worse, and then other areas in their life are getting severely affected. So, like employment is getting affected, social circles, relationships, those types of things. This is really what we're looking at. So it's hard to say, like, is this one thing or another, but it's really like the intensity, the magnitude, and ultimately the severity of it. So when people say eating disorders within the DSM, that's going to be anorexia nervosa, which most people know about, bulimia nervosa, again, most people know about. Those are the two classic eating disorders in there. And then now binge eating disorder is also in the DSM. And then there's some other like feeding issues with, people like pica when people eating non-food issues and things like that. So those are like the main three, and they present themselves differently. Um, and the type of client that fits into those is also different as well. Um, and with disordered eating, it's really just kind of we look at it as like patterns and behaviors of things that are maybe, again, problematic and they maybe are consistent, but not to the severity of, an eating disorder. So a lot of people, and that's where it gets murky because you have the ability, I could say, you could say, John could say, oh, that looks disordered or not. And we could all have different opinions because we all might probably agree because we all have similar viewpoints to these things. But let's say my neighbor versus us, right? Like maybe they have completely different perception of what is normal for food, and they could be like, "Oh my God, that's so disordered." Where, and that's what happens, of course, with a lot of people within the physique world, because it's like, "Oh my gosh, whoa, this looks like a disorder." And that's where it's tricky because you could look at someone who maybe is recovering from, maybe they've been diabetic their whole life, maybe they've been 100 pounds overweight, and now they've gotten to this space where they are no longer using insulin. They are in a healthy weight range. Their blood pressure is lowered, their blood markers look better, but now they are, prepping their food, going to the gym all the time, have a routine. That for them is pretty healthy, right? We could also take those same patterns and behaviors and rituals, and that could look problematic to someone if it is interfering with different areas of their life. And that's where we get into more of that rigidity. And it's not necessarily something as good or bad. It's more so how is it being like represented and how is it fitting into all these different areas of someone's life. And I've been talking about flexible restraint for literally since I did my master's research. And because it's so important, because it's never about the food, it's about how are we applying our restraint around this. Because we can all say, and you said it perfectly, Lisa, like this is a perfect example. You were like, the reason that I'm able to stay grounded is because I train and I make these meals and I have a healthy sleep routine and all these things that you listed off. But you also are someone who, if you were like, hey, like this thing came up today, you can't go to the gym, you'd be like, oh, I'm kind of bummed, but like, okay, keep it moving. Or, wow, my friends or family want to go out to eat. Okay, I will make an adjustment earlier in the day, and that'll be no problem. The person who is having more of these rigid or disordered behaviors would now have an emotional meltdown around that. They would not be able to do that comfortably. They might say no. They might, just create a lot of different problems. They might overcompensate. This is where some people get into purging. And this is the type of client that I will typically see who is like, this started off really with good intentions, but now I don't know where I'm at and really how to do this. And it's really tough because a lot of people want to have physique goals and health goals, and navigating those two things is really complicated. And that's usually where I come in.
Uh,
Lauren, I just have a real quick question on you named the three most common. If I were going to guess with my clients, and I'd say most of our clients, I would say binge eating is the most common. And I see extremes on both sides. So, like, you got people that compete and get on stage. I see way more binging after the show than I do like a physique or just a gen pop athlete that I need to get 20, 30 pounds off of. I still see some issues with food after, but what I've always, in my elementary thinking, I've always told my clients, hey, it's kind of like science. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you super restrict, you're going to possibly have a reaction after that's going to be the extreme opposite of that. So, like a lot of binging. Would you agree with that? And do you think that's most of what we see in our type of coaching?
So, with physique sports in particular, what's really interesting about that is because there is such a physiological drive to regain weight because it was such a dramatic change from like a healthy baseline. I don't
Yeah.
care who you are, I don't care what coach you have, I don't care if you're natural, if you're not, you've been doing this for a year or 15 years. getting stage lean is not a healthy thing. We all know this. It is not a state that our bodies should be in. And some people, we all have clients who they walk around pretty lean and they get stage lean and yeah, they're like, yeah, I'm hungry a little bit. Slept kind of weird a few days. Training's a little off, but I'm fine. And then we have the clients who really got to push. Like, we got to be doing a lot of cardio. Food is pretty low. Those are the clients who generally, because they've had to go so far from where they're at, and not even that they've had to, because they were like overly fat in their off season, just because like that's where their body is. To get stage lean is this really dramatic thing. So all of the physiological responses are like, hey, whoa, what's going on here? So we're working against that, which I would say is a really big driver for binging for a lot of individuals after competing. But also, regardless of who you're working with, competing has this very interesting, just like psychological underpinnings that are really there like the whole time. Because realistically speaking, you are being judged on what you look like by strangers. And for some people, that is a lot harder than others. It just is. Then there's also the competitive aspect. Some people expect to do really well and they don't. And there is this big letdown. Then there's also just the isolation that some people find themselves in as a bodybuilder. And afterwards, now they're like, I don't, my emotions are all dysregulated and I've isolated myself from my friends and family. And now what? And now I'm really starving and I can't really regulate myself. Well, here's food. So there's a lot of reasons why someone might binge, but I would say the first part is definitely the physiological side. And then many clients are struggling psychologically as well after competing, but those reasons are typically like, individualized.
Yeah. And then they're super, super upset with themselves, right? So, like,
Mhm.
psychologically after that, like, they're super upset with themselves because it almost feels like they, quote unquote, and I've heard this for decades and I've experienced this. We've all experienced this, right? But you, quote unquote, can't stop eating, right? After that extreme restriction. But then, yeah, then they feel like failures, right? Which can really be bad.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
for
want
sure.
to point out something else that you said, Lauren, and that was just sort of like the differentiation between occasional or momentary and sort of chronic, because I think as many of the listeners perhaps that might hear disordered eating patterns, maybe they're even just detecting or thinking back of some of their own behaviors. For instance, when I've spoken to clients that were like at the end of a diet, not necessarily for stage or anything like that, but they were telling me like, oh, I started eating with a small spoon so it would last longer, or I started like really taking my time and looking at food much more on like social media or whatever, and planning out my recipes that I would eat once I finished my diet. And like all of that sounds a little bit disordered, or maybe even to that individual feels disordered. But I
Mhm.
think it's also important to recognize that that's somewhat normal. Like your physiological responses, that your body's sending you all these hunger cues and making you like your brain making you obsessed with food thoughts is kind of normal at that stage because
Mhm.
you have been restricting for so long. So I don't think that those people need to think of anything like, is there something wrong with me? Do I need to go counsel or whatever? As long as
Mhm.
you have an exit strategy and you actually go through a reverse or a recovery diet, whichever is appropriate. And I think that's the other important part, that like acknowledging, yes, body fat will come back on if you have competed, and just making sure that you're really having a good guidance throughout that time as well, as opposed to back in the day, maybe 15, 20 years ago, when people didn't really do a proper reverse diet and they just like were left to their own devices at the end of a show, and their coach was like, good luck, obviously then listening to your hunger cues or to your like intuition was not the best thing to do, because then you would binge.
Absolutely. And that really speaks to that like time limited nature. And we would expect someone at the end of a diet to be hungry or to maybe eat with a smaller spoon. But that's when we have to, if a client shares those things with us, that's when we have to check in, a month later. Hey, where are we at with this, by the way? I just remembered this the other day. And we have to make sure that these things are not becoming chronic
Mm.
issues and someone then equating, oh, well, this worked, so now more must be better, because that's when it can start to get really out of control. But yes, normal situ a normal reaction to a very weird situation is weird things. So whenever someone's at the end of, especially like I said, a contest prep, but even if it's not a contest prep, because I think a lot of times lifestyle clients get not represented properly in this because it's like, well, physique competitors get really lean and lifestyle clients don't. And physique competitors get really lean, check. However, for a lifestyle client, if they have been at a certain set point or settling point for a very, very long time and they are very far away from that and they're very just like weight reduced in that state, like that's going to still be really, really challenging for them. And so that doesn't really, it's not just about the leanness. And I will always argue this that lifestyle clients are perpetual chronic yo-yo dieters. So every single time that they're engaging in these cycles, it's also physiologically sometimes getting harder for them if they have not replaced that muscle mass that they've lost in their diet. And then they're essentially just making things harder without even, doing anything necessarily. So there's a lot of nuance there. And I feel like sometimes lifestyle clients can get left out of that conversation because it's like, yeah, well, physique competitors are just getting lean. It's like, yes, that is a subset of problems. But then the lifestyle client has their own challenges that just look physically different, but are physiologically also challenging.
So is there like a physiological predisposition or even like I guess in terms of habits for people that are more prone for disordered eating?
Hmm. I actually don't know that. So I would be completely incorrect if I were to say one way or the other.
I
So I do
appreciate
not
that.
know. That would be
No,
a
thank you
great
for
thing to
that.
know, though.
That's a perfect answer, absolutely. But I guess going more into
Yeah.
the whole like body, like since it is a physique sport, can we talk a little bit about body dysmorphia even more so, and just like how would you define it first of all, and what's quote unquote normal, and where should we be a bit concerned?
Yeah, so this is another very interesting, intersection for bodybuilding because it's like, okay, bodybuilders are always going to have a above level interest in their body. Like that is why they do bodybuilding.
Mhm.
And so oftentimes what is driving sport success then can drive dysfunction as well. But it's like you sometimes can't have one without the other. So just like there's certain personality predispositions that people are going to have that can aid them in something like a physique sport, but it can also be the same thing that could be a detriment. Um, so in terms of body dysmorphia, and if anybody's curious, you can just Google what the actual, there's all these different criteria that somebody has to have, but it really is a true preoccupation, with body that is severely limiting functioning. So this is not just, oh, I looked in the mirror and I looked fat today and I'm upset. Like we all have those days. And if you don't have those days, that's amazing and congratulations. But I think everybody listening has probably had a day where they felt too big, too small, too in between, too whatever. And those days, it doesn't matter how healed you are and how much therapy you've had, like they're going to be there. It's often about, and that's a whole different misconception that we can get to, but so it's really this preoccupation that is really really damaging on a lot of levels. And then there's also what they call typically within disorders will be like a specifier. So specify with muscle dysmorphia if somebody is really preoccupied with their muscle size. So again, you're like, oh my God, this is obviously like all bodybuilders. And they're in the literature, yes, people, if they're studying bodybuilders, there's a higher level of body dysmorphia and muscle dysmorphia versus controls. And again, it's like, oh, didn't need a study for that one. Like clearly we all know that that's
Right.
kind of, you
Yeah.
know, that's, oh
Logic.
wow, bodybuilders use more drugs than the average person. No way. It's like, of course, like, wow, congrats. I'm glad you guys ran that study. But it's sometimes you have to, in science, to be fair with science, you have to run something before you can run something else. So I know sometimes people are like, why do you have to do a study on that? Hey, it's because you had to do, this is a stepping stone for another one. But there is a really great study, and I did talk about this at the conference this year in March. I'm like, when was that again? March? Yeah, March. There was this great study where they looked at bodybuilders versus resistance training controls, which is huge because if you look at again, if we're talking about body dysmorphia versus Somebody down the street, totally different perception, but
Yeah.
somebody at least who is resistance training and active versus someone who is a bodybuilder, a little bit more of an average comparison. And the instance was higher still. So it didn't seem like resistance training and having physique goals necessarily mediated that relationship. It was something about bodybuilding. And the question that none of us have the answer to is bodybuilding driving dysfunction or is dysfunction driving people to bodybuilding? And I
Mm,
think the answer is probably both.
yeah.
Mhm.
I don't think that there's one way to look at it or other. People who have a certain predisposition and personality type are drawn to something like bodybuilding. That's very clear. Most bodybuilders are eccentric and they have very specific personality traits that we could all pick out and go, yep, 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 no, no, no. Like we just know the person who not just does like a show, but like is in it. And then there are certain people who they just kind of do this and then they really get caught up and you're like, oh my gosh, like I remember them a couple years ago and now this is their whole life and they
Yeah.
have nothing else. And that's where we really have to work with that person to be like, listen, this is a byproduct of the sport and your relationship to it. It's not the sport's fault, it's your relationship to it. So we either
Yeah.
have to work on this or it might be best for you to step away because you now are completely isolated and in this echo chamber and are engaging in potentially really hazardous things. And, when we do get into the PED conversation, that is a whole
Yeah.
different conversation, but there's nothing against it. If people want to do that, I'm very supportive of that. But there are risks, and when those risks go unchecked for just the pursuit of filling whatever void emotional response or feeling like you have to achieve X, then we can start to run into some problems. And we see that, I mean, every year, unfortunately, we see headlines of this. So this is not like a made up problem. Like this
Mhm.
is very much a real thing within the space.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna say that, yeah, I totally agree or think that if it turns into you as your self-worth being associated or correlated with the body, like how you view yourself or your body image, so to speak, that's becoming dangerous. Or if it comes with narcissistic traits, if it comes with, like, as you said, it's your whole identity, what do you do if that falls away? If you have an injury, if you know, like, God forbid, like something happens, then you're basically prone to a crisis. And so I think you explained that really nicely.
yeah, and this is just where it comes down to, and this is for everything, but having protective factors in place for your life. And we could have the same conversation for someone who is, an alcoholic. They need protective factors in their life to no longer be an alcoholic. It's not just don't drink. I mean, that sounds great in theory, but it's do we have the coping skills? Do you have the network of other sober people? Do you have just, a fulfilling career? Do you have things that you enjoy doing, right? Like we would consider those protective factors for someone who has a substance use disorder. So the same thing goes for bodybuilding when you have things outside of physique sports that you care about, do you have friends who are not just internet friends who are also doing this, like people in your real life? Do you have, again, a career? Honestly, I feel like the clients I've had who do the best with competing are all outside of the space. They just do this because it's fun. They like it. It's crazy, but they like it. I find that the clients who this is there also their work, it can be really challenging because then how do you separate it? It's really hard to separate me as an athlete versus me as a coach if I'm doing those things. And then it becomes this, circular problem of, well, I have to look a certain way for content. And then if I don't look a certain way, then I get less clients and then I have less business. So I must look a certain way all the time. And then, oh my gosh, I must be sage linear around that. And then
Hmm.
we've all worked with those clients and we've all been there potentially ourselves. And it's really, really challenging, especially now in the space. How digitalized, and is that even a word? You guys know what I meant. How digital, I can't even work technology, I'm just making words up. How digital things are and how much appearances drive business.
Yeah.
And it's really becoming very, very interesting. And this is, I'd argue, not even just for bodybuilders anymore. This is just fitness in
Yeah.
general.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, John, did you want to add anything to the point of the body dysmorphia?
I'm going to end up making us go off course because there's this topic that Lauren, at some point, obviously, we're going to have you back, right? And you'll
Oh,
speak
of
at
course.
events down the road. There
Yeah.
is a topic that I would love to go down at some point, and I'll just kind of tease it here for people. And maybe this is just me being personal here, but for those people that have been through some kind of traumatic event, a divorce for me back when I was younger, right? And I was fat and I found the gym and then I found bodybuilding and then I found all these things. And I'm a super type A driven type person, but catching things in the early stages when you've been through a traumatic event and then you do turn to the gym and then you turn to bodybuilding and
Hmm.
then you do kind of isolate. Like, I think there's some different areas that we can talk about that we just don't have time about here. Obviously, the mental health side of the sport is a something that you're spending years going to school for. So like we can't put it all in here. So it's just kind of making my mind spin on,
Yeah.
me personally, but my clients that I've helped. One thing I don't think that we have in here that I do want to bring up, you had mentioned this at our podcast. So that's an area I shouldn't be helping my clients with, right? At the Fat Muscle Academy, you pointed out, hey, coaches, you can't be all these things. Can you kind of speak on that just for a minute? Because we have a lot of people listening that are coaches and they're trying to be all the things that you named at the podcast, the gut health experts, the therapists that, can you speak on that for a
Yeah.
second?
I feel like this is so important. And if this helps, honestly, just one person, I will be happy because I feel like the space, and we'll just call it the fitness space, has become an industry where one coach is supposed to be everything to every client they have.
Yeah.
And that is not only just inappropriate, it is also impossible. Not one person can be qualified enough to be an expert in all those areas. That's why people choose one or two things to dive into. This does not mean that you shouldn't have baseline information and we all need to be specialists. I also disagree with that. I think that if we get too specialized, then we get so narrow and we forget all the other things. But you don't need to be a gut health specialist, a hormone specialist, a physical therapist, the best training programmer, biomechanics expert, nutrition coach, bodybuilding coach, therapist, like, career specialist, divorce specialist. Like there are so many things that coaches are expected, so many hats we're expected to wear. And I just want to release coaches of that burden of saying, hey, it's okay. You're not going to be that to everybody. I can't tell you how many people come to me, oh, well, can you do this? That's not my area. I know a little bit about hormones. I know a little bit about, gut health. I know a little bit about training. I never pretend like those are my areas of expertise. I know people who doesn't even, I'm not even talking it doesn't matter how many years I spend doing something, they're just better at it. And that's great. I want them to do that. I do nutrition and mindset. Those are my things that I like to do. Those are the things that I'm good at. And so I think if you're a coach listening, it's okay to have one or two specialties or things that you really, really focus on. And I'm not talking in a niche down your marketing strategy way. I don't mean any of that shit. I mean, like, actually, what are you good at doing? And you
Yeah.
should probably pick one or two things. And for everybody listening who's looking for a coach, also keep that in mind too, that it's something that while we can talk about, like, yeah, we want to have a full service and we want to do this, there's just only so much that one person can do. And it's not even about money. Like, even if I was like, hey, I'm $3,000 a month, like what is that going to even do? Like I still can't do all of those things that
Right.
I'm saying that I'm going to do. And unfortunately, what's happened is that the shitbag marketing people who have taken over the fitness space are telling people to have no boundaries as coaches, 24/7 access to me.
Mhm.
Not one person has 24/7 access to me ever. In a
Right.
coaching scenario where this is not life or death or a crisis, there's no crisis. Like in mental health, there are crises. That is a real thing. In the online coaching where we are working on your nutrition and mindset and training, there are no crises. So People who are advertising that, that is your own decision if you want to do that, but I would highly advise against it. But we have people who are marketing things like zero boundaries, all this access, and talk about that you can do all these things. And it's never going to go away because it's human nature. And I can get sick and tired of it and scream about it and like I do. I swear I'm also a grumpy 80-year-old man sometimes, but it is just human nature. There's always going to be people who want to do that. There's always going to be people who sell the dream. And guess what? Because people want to buy the dream, which is the fundamental problem. But we're all like that. If someone, like, we all, no, I won't fall for that. And then we all do. We all do. If somebody's like, I can teach you this, you can do this. And you're like, in our space, we're like, no, you can't. No, you can't. But if somebody told me that for like taxes, I'd be like, yeah, let me buy that because I hate taxes. I hate finance stuff, hate anything to do with money. So we all do it. And that's where we just have to check ourselves and say, okay, as coaches, we need to hold our standard and say to people, these are the things that I do. If you don't like it, there's other coaches for you. And this happened to me recently. There was someone who I had a call with and really felt like I could have helped her, really, really would have been able to connect with her on a lot of her issues that she was having. Like, honestly, it was like a perfect fit type client, but she wanted someone who was going to do who offer texting. And I don't do that. And
Mm-mm,
so it was really
nope.
hard. But
Well,
I was like, I'm sorry if this is a deal breaker for you. I understand, but I'm just not going to be able to offer that. And it's one of those things where it's in a time where I'm like, man, it's always this pull. Like, do I make that sacrifice for, to want to help? But then it's also like, what am I doing for myself?
mhm.
So definitely release that burden that you have to be everything to everyone because you're not going to be able to, and that's okay.
Yeah. And you'll become better because you're
Yeah.
not trying to be everything to everyone. So, yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, really important. I think these days more than ever. And another thing I wanted to go back to because you framed it or coined it so nicely is you said uh, rigid flexibility, like something like that. That is something that you've been preaching for a long time. Is that correct? Was that the term that you used?
Flexible restraint, yes.
Flexible restraint. Yeah, that makes a
Yes.
lot more sense. But yeah, I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, that principle
Yes.
and kind of like the flip side of why
Mhm.
people do yo-yo back and forth, why they are starting these behaviors of like binge eating or even just purging or whatever it might be, all or nothing thinking. Like, yeah, how do we go from one to the other?
Absolutely. And this is where I think everybody can fall into this continuum or the spectrum at some point. And it's, do I have all or nothing thoughts? Oh my God, I had like 15 this morning. And it was like, literally, my mom was like, aren't you going to school for this? Why do you keep saying this about yourself? And I was like, stop. And it's just like, yeah, I know, thanks. But we all have it. But the difference is, and this is where I try to talk with clients about this too, it's never that that thought is going to go away. Maybe it will, and that would be amazing. Oh my gosh, yay, it went away. But for many people, especially for those of us who have been plagued with certain types of really like intense thoughts, or disordered thoughts, it's not about going away. It's about lessening that intensity and also having that flexibility to say, hey, this thought's here, but I'm not letting this drag down the rest of my day or now create other issues. So I can have this really negative thought, or I can have this, I can catastrophize, or I can have this all or nothing thinking moment, because I will. And then it's about, let me get this out. Let me sit with this. Why did I say that? Why did I feel that way? It's not about ignoring it, but it's about sitting with it for a second and going, okay, well, this probably came up for this reason. Or I don't really know where this is coming from. This is something to explore. And now it's on my radar and it's going to come up at some point. I don't have to have an answer for it right now. A lot of us who like to have answers for things, oh, negative thought. Where did it come from? Must figure it out this moment or I am a failure. Hello, another all or nothing, like literally another black and white thought. Like, must be a failure if I can't get to the root of this problematic thought I've had for 30 years. But we do that. So it's like, hey, I had it. Maybe I don't have the answer for what this means. also okay. And then you sit with it and then you move forward. That's like having that psychological flexibility. So there can be flexibility with food, there can be food with like there can be psychological flexibility with our thoughts and our emotions and our behaviors with all of that. Um, but really with in terms of flexible restraint. So if we think about restraint of food, it can fall across this continuum of rigid to flexible. And too much of anything cannot be good. And that doesn't mean that all rigid thoughts are bad, doesn't mean that all flexible thoughts are good. But in general, flexible restraint means that you are moderating yourself. You have the ability to say yes to something in the moment or no to something or to pre-plan for it. So as an example that I used earlier with you, Lisa, like if tonight, or not tonight, because it's already tonight, but if tomorrow night, unexpectedly you get invited to like a dinner and you know that you're going somewhere where it's going to be, a more indulgent dinner than maybe you would normally eat, you're going to say, all right, I'm going to plan for this and I'm going to maybe, have a little bit of a lighter lunch. Gonna have that dinner. And if I'm there and I'm eating and I'm full, I'm full. Okay. And I keep moving. And that means that when I come home, I don't have to keep eating because I've already started to eat, which is a very common thing that we see with our clients. And that also means that I don't need to starve myself tomorrow because what that's going to do is that's going to create even more compensatory hunger, which then drives another overeating episode. And then we keep doing this. So it's really just about how can I moderate myself in this moment? And also, just like with the thought, I don't know where this is coming from. If we do something and it doesn't pan out as well as we'd like, okay, I learned from that. Maybe I overate because I was really hungry. Maybe I restricted too much at lunch, actually. Maybe my light lunch was like nothing.
Mhm.
So I need to actually know that before I go out to eat, maybe I eat the same amount of food and then I won't actually end up overeating. So no experience is bad. It's more about being mindful of what did that teach me? What did it bring up? So when I'm working with clients on untracked meals, which is something that I really have for every client, it's something where I don't really give a lot of like prescriptions around for the first time or two because I really just want to see like I want to just say, hey, I want you to eat most of your normal meals and then go have an untracked dinner. I leave it very open-ended because I want to see what that means to someone. I could put, I could put a whole PDF together. I have a PDF of what all that looks like. But what I've learned is that it's actually better for someone to go do that and then report back to me what happened because all of us could go do that and have a different experience. And while I might be 80% right, the 20% is that variation that I want to hear from them so that I'm not putting my experience over theirs. And that's really where it takes a little bit more time, but it's actually much more impactful in the long run.
I love that because yeah, truly it could mean like a burger and fries and ice cream, or it could mean I'm having this light chicken salad and yeah, that without dressing on the side. You
Mhm.
know, like that could still be an untracked meal for somebody.
Yes. And then breaking apart what that actually means is really important. And the way I look at coaching is because to me, coaching is ideally a long-term investment. Of course, we can't ever know how long someone's going to sign up for, but ideally, we're going to have at least a couple months, right? I would love at least a year with every client. Like, part of me sometimes like yearns to just be like, you have to sign up for a year, just because I feel like a year that so much good can happen, and there's also so much in someone's life that can happen in a year that we can work through. But anyways, so if anybody reaches out, let's sign up for a year because we would do some really good stuff. Just kidding. But let's say we have a couple months with someone, we're going to make these like tiny micro adjustments and like, okay, well, this happened this week. What came up? Okay, let's adjust that. Okay, now because we fixed this, this other thing came up. Like we can never really plan what's going to happen there. So that's why I love to have it's the same idea. Like I have some like, you know, rules around it, some suggestions. And then it's like open to their experience. And that's the also important part. I'll finish this out with the flexible versus rigid. Rigid res flexible restraint, sorry, is a two-part word. There is still restraint involved. It doesn't just mean flexibility for all and for all things and for to just do whatever at any time. There is still a restraint aspect, and that really speaks in my mind to the moderation part of it, is that like how John said, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I can't remember which Newton law that is. I think it's two, but
Yeah.
we're I don't know, probably like between 2 to 4, I think. So everything has this. So if we go really hard on the flexibility, maybe we need to have a little bit more restraint. If we have too much restraint, maybe we need to do a little more flexibility. And that will also depend on where someone is at and that in their life. If someone's life is blowing up, oh my God, all these layoffs at work, my kids are sick, I've had 3 fights with my husband this week. I'm not like, let's test your flexile
Yeah.
restraint this week with food. No, hey, we're gonna make it. What's the easiest thing you can do this week? How do
Yeah.
we make this as easy as possible? Okay, that's going to be a win for this week. So that's also a thing where a lot of times people, especially clients who are inclined to reach out to an online coach, are very, not always, but generally very like, I want numbers, I want to know things, I have these ideas, how do we fix this? I want to do that. And very, very structured. And there's always like what's the answer? What's the next move? And that's where it's like, I'm not going to know what's going on in your life for us to even plan or prepare for that. So we're just going to have to take this week by week, which I know sounds really frustrating, but that's in my mind actually the beauty of coaching
Mhm.
is that it allows for those week to week or bi-weekly, depending on what someone's doing, changes and adjustments.
I think a good example, maybe then listening to you talk about flexible restraint is, and I just throw an example out here. I've got a guy that struggled after his extreme diet. We lost about 45 pounds and he's was struggling. So I've got him eating 2 untracked meals a week, but I don't just, and he has a free meal too to go out and just eat whatever. Like I'm done. Like, dude, I don't care. Whatever you eat. He like trains legs that day. He needs a lot of calories. It's fine. Go eat a pizza and I don't give a shit. But 2 other days a week, go out, take your wife out because it's important for them to go out and have meals together. And I'm like, eat an untracked meal, but strive to keep it. And I hate to use the word clean, but healthy. That way you can celebrate having a healthy meal and pick a lean protein, pick a carb, whatever you want, and have some steamed veggies. It's going to taste amazing. Don't even track it, just count it as a quote unquote meal and go out and do that twice a week and don't worry about it. And mentally, it's really helped him. And then on my side, I know if he has chicken and rice and steamed veggies, it's going to taste amazing. He's not gaining fat, right? Like, just no one's going to gain fat from a meal like that. But, hey, if you want to have a salad instead, or if you want to have shrimp, like, I don't care. Just try and celebrate being healthy, but don't track it. That has seemed to be flexible enough, but also showing the restraint to where he's not gaining 30 pounds, right?
Yes. That's a really great example of being able to integrate all of those aspects because especially for a client who has lost a significant amount of weight, like 45 pounds is a lot of weight, and that
Mhm.
is really great. And I can imagine that he wants to maintain that as close as
Yeah.
he can. That wasn't like a contest prep, 45 pounds, I need to gain weight. Like this was I lost 45 pounds and I'm trying to maintain this as close as I can.
Yes, exactly.
So in those instances, especially early on, we do have to be tighter with our choices, just given the physiological changes that are kind of settling afterwards. And just in general, it's a really a reframe of like, how do I eat most of my meals to live my life? I think most people who have, weighed their food for a long time, have tracked their food, the reason they can stop doing that is because they've done it for so long. Like
Yeah.
I haven't weighed or tracked. I weigh things occasionally, just honestly, sometimes just to check myself, but mostly like if I'm meal prepping, I want to be like, make sure I like did I measure this right? Did I eyeball this right? But I'm not plugging certainly anything to an app because I never do that. But it's one of those things that I did that for so many years. I literally used to study food labels when I had an eating disorder. I probably know more food labels and nutrition facts than anybody that than 15 people combined need to know. So I don't like need to do that anymore, but it's because I've been able to regulate myself. Now, in the same instance, because of that internal or because of all those external metrics that I had for so long, I've now developed more internal metrics. So when I feel like, I feel like I'm kind of gaining a little bit of weight. Well, I've been sitting more because of, this semester and not being able to be as active. And I feel like I've been having a little bit more snacks than I normally would have just because of the timing. I can then check myself to be like, all right, this doesn't mean no, none of this. It means maybe a little bit less. either in quantity that day when I'm having them, or just maybe I don't have that on certain days. But those skills take a really long time to develop. So that's where that art of coaching comes in to say, I want to give client, some more liberties and some more flexibility, but we still have to keep that restraint in there. And that's going to look different for everyone. So the fact that that's working for him really great is amazing. And you touched on a really key point there with socializing. And the root of a lot of dysfunction just comes from not having social networks and people to rely on. And it's so important, so, so important. So whether it's friends, family, significant others, kids, all of that is crucial in our lives. And whether we like some people agree with this or not, like food is a big thing to have with other people. Like it just is. And it doesn't mean that every time you do something, it has to be this big indulgent celebration. It means that sometimes it is, and other times it's just chicken and broccoli, but it's at a restaurant, and that's fun.
Yeah.
So it just goes back to those choices and that moderation behind it. If every single time was, no, you got to hold this, can't have that, that becomes a problem.
Yeah.
But if every time you say yes to everything, that's also can become a problem.
Mhm.
Yep.
So it all works on the same spectrum.
Well, Lauren, I think that was like lots of amazing practical tips, really, especially also just the reminder that it takes time. It often takes guidance. It takes moderation and long-term mindset. So thank you so much for just sharing all of this with us. And as John said, there's going to be all your links in the show notes. And yeah, John, did you have a closing question, closing thoughts, anything?
I have another question. And I apologize if we go a little bit long here. I feel like we need to answer something for some of the people that might be struggling with binge eating. I just know personally with my clients over the years, I know there's people listening thinking, okay, I'm having trouble eating off the plan and I'm beating myself up for it.
Mhm.
And I'm having trouble like twice a week. I'm in the pantry at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
What can I do? Let's give people some practical tips real quick because I know we have that listener right now that, like you said, Lauren, if we can help one person, I want to help that one person. So, like, what are some things that people can do? They're not in contest prep. Like, that's a different beast, right? If you're in contest prep, like that's its whole animal. We're not talking about that. What can you do to help people that are having issues with binge eating a couple times a week?
Yeah.
It's normal, right? Like that. I don't want people listening to be like, "Oh, fuck that. Those people have an issue." No, listen. There's a lot of people listening that won't admit that they're doing this. So, like, that's the person I want to help.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was first going to say, this is normal and this happens to a lot of people. You are certainly not the only one. I cannot tell you how many times I found myself in a situation like that. And it would never have been considered binge eating disorder because it wasn't. But it's enough of a quantity or enough of a feeling to go, this feels a little out of control now. And I don't like this. Why am I doing it? So first, definitely normalizing that experience. I would say one of the biggest things I see with people who fall into binge eating is they do not eat enough during the day. And that sounds probably really counterproductive because you're like, did you not just hear me? I'm eating 2,000 calories at 1 in the morning. Why do I need to eat more during the day? Just when I tell you that one of the biggest things, even working with clients who have like bulimia, this is one of the things too, where having just consistent meals is so important. And our mind will trick us to say, well, I overate, so I need to undereat, or I need to get it out and exercise. If take a week or two to just eat more food during the week and during the day in particular, that will help so much. Will you maybe gain some weight? Potentially. But if the goal is to stop binging, we're going to have to face the fact that weight might be a little weird for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. And that's just kind of the byproduct of working on any of these things. So first and foremost, eating more during the day, eating actual meals, not just snacking or grazing, really being like, I'm sitting down and I'm eating a meal and I'm focusing on this meal, what it tastes like, what it looks like, the texture, like that kind of like that mindful eating. Because a lot of times, I mean, raise your hand if you eat on the go or you don't really pay attention or ding, 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 people are on their phones or they're watching something. And I'm not going to say that I never do that. Of course, that happens to everybody. But if I find myself like, did I even just eat? And then I'm like, oh, yeah, because I was watching something or I was listening to something or I was on my phone or I was totally distracted. And it's really like we start to become severed from our hunger and satiety signals in that way too. So even just being more mindful about the meals and eating, again, actual meals, not snacks all day. So those are some really like during the day practical steps that can immediately help. Now, with any type of problematic behavior, a more long-term strategy that's going to take a couple weeks, but it's really creating a diary of what is going on that might be driving this. Because when someone says, I'm in the pantry at 1 in the morning, why am I doing this? My answer would be, I don't know. We need to figure this out. It's like a puzzle. It's like a like a crime investigation, right? Like what happened? Let's backtrack. What happened today? What's happening on these micro levels. Well, every Wednesday I've been binging. Okay, well, what happens on Wednesday afternoon? I have this meeting with this coworker that I really don't like, and they get under my skin, and I'm feeling really dysregulated. Well, that could be leading to potentially you binging. Or maybe it's, I'm just in general, I'm just so stressed out. I can't even I can't even take 2 seconds for myself. Okay, well, those look like maybe some different strategies too. So it's really about let's actually get to the root of what is going on. And some people have a lot of awareness. So they're like, oh, yeah, immediately, this is it. Bam. I would say the majority of people don't, and that's again very normal. So this is where it's going to take a little bit of time. And I like to have people just kind of keep a record of things that are going on. This could be in your phone on the notes app. This could be like a sticky note or whatever. But just kind of check in with yourself at least once a day, if not a couple times during this process to really start to like gather data and figure out like what actually is going on in terms of, and this could be like physiological stuff, but it could also just be these emotional things. And that's usually why I find that people dysregulated emotionally or they're trying to get emotions out. That's where a lot of food behaviors kind of fall into line. Um, is a way to actually regulate that. So that's going to take a little bit longer. So those are two approaches, the short and long term, quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a much longer answer than what we're able to give here, but at least that's gives somebody some starting points, right?
Of
Like
course.
start eating some meals, being consistent,
Mhm.
that's good. So yeah, Lisa, I don't have anything else.
Well, I think that was a perfect closing point, and again, like lovely practical takeaway, which is always what we aim to give here. So, yeah, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, I really appreciate you guys. This was so great and definitely want to come back for another one. So happy to do that. And as John mentioned, yes, I am taking on clients. So I do just typical kind of, online coaching, whether weekly or biweekly, but I also have been doing more just like consult calls for hire. So sometimes people just want to troubleshoot different problems that they're having. I do that also with coaches. So both options, just depending on everybody's needs.
Yeah, we'll have all Lauren's contact information in the show notes. And speaking of contact information, if you ever want to hear different guests, if you ever have questions, we have some Q&As coming up. Lisa and I compile quite a few questions for the Q&A or just any kind of feedback. Speaking of, if you would just hit pause, leave us a review. That helps get this podcast out. We work hard. We don't run ads or any of that. Like I mean, it's Fat Muscle Project podcast, and we don't even talk about the supplements hardly here at all, right? Like, it's not about that. But we just ask that you guys leave a review, and we'll keep the content coming from myself, Lauren, and Lisa. We're out of here. See you guys.